would you agree with the proposition that social media as a proxy for the marketplace of ideas today does not function well?
Dr. Janil, I believe there are gaps.
Okay.
And I think you have also referred to, I forget the exact words you use, but an all-encompassing approach to deal with the ecosystem.
A holistic, multifaceted
all right,
approach.
Yes. Multifaceted, that's right, yeah. So on that, I think we are in agreement.
Yes.
We see that there are gaps.
Yes.
We hope that the social media companies can work closer with governments.
Yes. No, Mr. Lein, we agree on this. I'm not trying to pick holes in that part of the argument.
Sure, okay.
But I just want to focus specifically on the issue of is there a functioning marketplace of ideas in the social media space today?
I think it can be improved because social media appeals to, I think like what you mentioned, appeals to the biasness of the users as well. So it's not perfect, and it can be done better.
So the use of social media as a proxy for the concept of marketplace ideas today is flawed. It's not perfect. I'm not saying it's completely inappropriate or impossible, but it's not entirely functioning as we would hope for some of the reasons that you've articulated. You'd agree with that, right?
Yes.
Bias you've talked about, an excess of information that you have mentioned in your submission as well, the inability of the readership, the audience, to actually discern truth from falsity sometimes as you confirm people's biases. The exploitation of the platform for the purposes of advertising and monetization to target specific consumers. All these undermine the marketplace of ideas. And similarly, people who act with some degree of malfeasance and mischief to exploit that space, ideologues that Dr. Lein spoke about, deliberately misleading actors that she spoke about, as well as irrational people. All of these behaviors will undermine the ability for that marketplace of ideas to function to the point where just simply having more ideas and more commentary will automatically be a good, be a benefit. Would you agree with that proposition? That we need to fix the process so that further creativity, further ideas, and further expressions can be better for us, whereas absent fixing it, we may not be dealing with the problem. If you agree that the marketplace of ideas today is flawed, surely before we add more ideas to that marketplace, we need to fix the marketplace first.
I think we should try our best to fix this very flawed marketplace of ideas. I guess we are just not sure whether we are able to do so completely. So,
no, I understand.
Yeah.
But you agree that the marketplace of ideas is flawed, it needs fixing, before further contributions to that marketplace can work to reinforce the original conception of what that marketplace of ideas we hope will do.
We can agree, yeah.
Okay. So would it be fair to say then that you agree with the idea that more information on its own is not sufficient? That actually what we need is more credible and accurate information in a functioning marketplace of ideas. You need both of those phrases to be complete and sufficiently dealt with in order for our aims to be addressed.
We cannot disagree with that.
And so that doesn't preclude the possibility that legislation is necessary in order to achieve those aims.
No, not at all. Just now, Wee King mentioned that he was conflicted, right? So I guess for us, the key thing, of course, is how we define the legislation. I think we don't disagree with the need for legislation, but how tightly it's being defined in terms of deliberate online falsehood. So that's our concern there.
I hope you'll appreciate that all the members of the committee and what we've said in person as well as what we've put down in paper, we are quite concerned that any legislation, if it occurs, needs to be very carefully written, very specifically scoped, and operationalized in a very deliberate way so that the end result is an increase of trust in discourse and discussion, because that will be to benefit of all of us. I hope we can agree on that.
Yes, fully.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Edwin? I realize I may not have been clear in some of my points, so I just wanted to come back to a few with you. The first is this question of online falsehoods. I think we agreed earlier that there is no place for it, deliberate online falsehoods, and we should do what we can to eradicate this,
Yes.
right? So whether we use legislation or a suite of or combination of other measures, that is the end game, to remove online falsehoods, correct?
Yes.
So if one was publishing something that is true, there should be no concern,
Yes.
Yes.
right? And there should also be no fear or concern that there is any degree of censorship or removal of creativity, or using the words you have used in your submission, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Because as I think we agreed earlier, if you remove falsehoods, you might actually promote more creativity with truth.
Yes. We can.
Would you agree? I think earlier in response to Ms. Rahayu's questions, I can't find my notes on that now, but I think you mentioned that the level of trust on the mainstream media is not high. Do you recall that?
I spoke about a perceived bias, a perceived view.
Perceived bias,
Yeah.
okay.
That we feel that
Okay.
the public has towards mainstream media, yes.
Would you accept that the Edelman publication actually ranks our mainstream media much higher than others?
I accept that they have published their findings, yes. I mean,
Which ranks our mainstream media higher than the mainstream media of many other countries?
Yes.
yes.
Yes. And we heard CNA and ST come earlier and say that, you know, when there is, of course, lots of people go to other sites, including yours. But what they tell us is that when there is a significant event, when there's something that's particularly newsworthy, they see a significant spike in the number of clicks onto their own website, which they say suggests that at the end of the day, the mainstream media is still trusted for serious news. Would you disagree with that?
No, we don't. But we also, I believe, see a spike on our own site
Yes.
during major events, major national events.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you see a corresponding spike as well on your site?
Yes. During
That's
the
right,
general
yes.
elections.
In fact,
yes.
I think not just our site, but the entire social media space in general, I think it buzzes when there are national events or big events or extraordinary events that occur.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on the suite of options as countermeasures to deal with this, legislation being something that we spoke about, would you agree that in the context of what we've just been discussing, legislation to remove online falsehoods would not affect free speech?
It would not, but of course, the key question is how sharp or how fine the legislation is. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you see, earlier on we heard evidence from Professor Teo Lein from NUS. And she said that, quoting several cases and some learning, that there is no public interest in purveying false information. And free speech must have at least those limits. Would you agree?
Fully agree.
Right. So if you define legislation to remove false information, then it really doesn't impact for free speech. Correct?
Correct.
You would agree.
I would.
So legislation would therefore be a useful tool in dealing with online falsehoods, because really that's the only way you can have effective countermeasure against material that travels faster than truth.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Tong, may I also add on that our concern that there are people who are perhaps on certain subject matters that they feel more educated or more informed about, or they may be domain experts. But there are many others who may only have a view of a certain subject matter. Yeah, and if the legislation is too blunt, too strong, too hard-handed, I wonder if it might create I won't call it a climate of fear, but perhaps it will make people more mindful about actively participating in the public discourse. They may have a view, but because of this legislation, they may be less willing to share that view, for better or worse. Yeah.
But if the objective of the legislation is to remove falsehoods, and we've discussed that and your views on this earlier, then no one wants to have a, let me rephrase that, no one is saying that you can not articulate your views, because as long as you keep to within what is not deliberate online falsehoods, there's nothing to fear, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Yes. Maybe I'd like to add on as well. It also very much depends on which actors are using the legislation, implementing the legislation. So from our experience as an online site, when we were asked by IMDA to be part of the class license, I think from our experience you can see in terms of the track record, how IMDA has adopted a light touch approach, and that helps, I think, us get a good sense of the legislation. And if I were to use another example, POHA, right? We have gotten, I think, even for us, 2 to 3 POHAs against Mothership. So it really very much depends on who are the actors. Some if it's perhaps from of national security concern and it's being used by the government, I expect the government to be very prudent with the approach. But I've also seen how POHA is being used by other actors as well, and sometimes I'm not quite sure if they are as careful and prudent.
Right, but we're talking about putting out falsehoods, deliberately lying, and conveying lies. Now, there can be no room for that whatsoever. You agree?
Yes, I think we've stated
right.
that really
I think we
clearly.
totally agree on this, right? Yes. So if that is the object of the legislation and the intent, then I think one has to be entirely supportive of that, correct?
Yes, we are. But again, I have to say that we need to see the nature of the legislation. Yeah.
So what you're saying really is you would support the fact that you must have legislation against deliberate falsehoods, lying, putting out lies. But the question becomes how we then draft it, how we then differentiate it in the way we have discussed earlier.
That is absolutely right. Yes.
But I think the fundamental objective of having legislation tackle and effectively tackle robustly online falsehoods, you have no disagreement with.
We do not. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.